Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Mr. Hunt. Please join us at the dais. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to a regular session of the Riverside Unified School District Board of Education. Tonight we will start, well, let's see. We've just returned from closed session where we, took no action, I guess, did we? Yeah. Well, I guess we're going to vote on it. We have a couple items we're going to pull, I think, on our consent agenda. So we took no action on anything. We did make an appointment for a district superintendent, which we will vote on in a bit. And so let's get the meeting started then with our Pledge of Allegiance. I'm hesitating because we did decide in our closed session to appoint a new district superintendent, but we also have a first action item, which is to vote on his contract. So I think what we'll do is we'll take a vote on the contract, and we will then discuss it. Mr. Hunt?
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve A1 as presented.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second by Mr. Lee. All members of the board, please vote. That motion carries. So the Riverside Unified School District has a new superintendent, Dr. David Hanson. Please welcome him. And Dr. Hanson is no stranger to Riverside Unified School District. I think many of you know him. He comes to us from Corona Norco Unified, sorry. But he was also formerly a teacher here and a principal and has played many roles. And what was it that you told me in your 26-year career has only been spent in 2 districts? Is that correct?
Yeah, I spent the first 20 years here in Riverside and spent the last 6 years in a neighboring district, Corona Norco.
Oh, great. So welcome, Dr. Hanson.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. And members of the board, Mr. Fine, the cabinet members that are here, and the colleagues and the community members that are here. I stand before you very humbled and grateful for the privilege which you have given me to come back and lead this great district. I shared with you that 6 years ago when I left to accept the assignment as assistant superintendent, deep down in, I always kind of hoped and thought that perhaps someday, if the opportunity presented itself, I'd like to come back and lead the great district of Riverside. And here we are today. Brings back a lot of memories. 25 years ago this summer, I was a new teacher and started at Central Middle School. And I remember, I think it was, if I remember the names right, Paula Mayer, and I think even Barbara Lightwell was in BITSA back then, and we took a bus trip of the city. And we saw the different communities, we saw the different schools. Riverside looked very differently 25 years ago. But one thing stands out as we went to the district office. And there on the 3rd floor, I met our superintendent, Mr. George Lance. And I'm not sure what he said, but I remember his presence. I remembered that he was someone of significance and he really cared about the district and the community. And since then, as I've had a chance to work with several superintendents over the years, I've had such high regard for them and held them in the highest esteem and respect. And so I'm humbled to know that now, as the superintendent, I'll be in that same office on the 3rd floor, following George Lance, Paul Houston, Tony Lardieri, Susan Rainey, and last but certainly not least, Rick Miller. Never had a chance to work with Rick, but personally, but I've been in many meetings with him. And so as I come in, again, I respect the position, I honor it, and I will certainly uphold the expectation that you have as me as the superintendent in Riverside. So I come with a rich history as far as a lot of people to thank. Those leaders have done wonderful. The Riverside Board has been professional over the years, and it continues to be professional today, led by community members that are involved in many aspects of the community. And I admire the work that you do for the betterment of the students here in the city. And I look to the future and I have a lot of hope when I see the years ahead in education, to prepare all of our students for college, of course, and career, to help our community really have pride in their schools, because the pride of the community is found in the schools, and to have schools that people want to come to, move to the Riverside for, because they want their kids to come to these schools. And so there's just a lot of hope that I have, a focus on student achievement, also a focus on all employees. We're in a people business, and to take care of all of our employees. We could not do it without the great employees here in Riverside, those who are the support staff and those that are in the classroom, to give our teachers the very best professional development to help them prepare the students so that they will be college and career ready, and then to take care of all the employees, to really focus on not just professional development, but leadership development. I have come to believe, I'm a firm believer, that leadership development at all levels in their organization improve student achievement. And so to develop all of the leaders and all of the adults to be leaders will certainly be one of the areas that we focus on. So thank you. I am grateful to be here. It's been a whirlwind. It's gone really quickly, as you know. Just today, my family and I that joins me here, we're out shopping for houses. And that's an adventure within itself. It's bittersweet. We've lived in the same area, the great city of Jurupa Valley, for 25 years. The same church congregation, the same home for 22 of those years. But Riverside is so important to us that we are moving into the district. We've already sold our home. It went fast. It closes escrow this Friday. So if you know a home I can rent for the next couple of months.
Hey, if you need a realtor, I know a guy down there. So
It all works out. It all works out, and we're anxious to come back. You know, Diane and I have 6 beautiful kids, you know that. And 4 have been through the Riverside schools. I was 3 of their principals at Gage Middle School. My 4th daughter did attend Gage. A couple of our kids graduated from Poly High School, and one went to Arlington High School. And now these 2 that are here, they're anxiously await which school they're going to go to. Their older brothers and sisters, there's competing between the Mighty Lions and the Mighty Bears. But we know that there's 3 other wonderful high schools, too, that would serve our children well. So we're just grateful to be back here. And let me certainly just say something about my family. While there's a lot of leaders that I have learned from that have helped develop who I am, some of you heard me say this before, but top credit goes to my wife, Diane. Taking from Abraham Lincoln a little bit, all that I am or all that I ever hope to be, I owe to my eternal companion, Diane. And I'm so thankful to her. She has stood next to me for 28 years, 6 children and 3 grandchildren now. And it's absolutely a blessing to have her by my side and for me to be her companion that she's chosen to spend her time with. And then our 6 wonderful kids, and these 2 are troopers. They're resilient as they pick up their roots, leave the home that they were born in and the schools that they've attended, and come to Riverside to follow Dad. But it's all good. It's all really good. And so thank you, Madam President, members of the board, and to my Riverside family. It is good to come home. And I feel like I am coming home. So thank you very much.
thank you, Dr. Henderson. I hope you and your wife and kids can stick around for just a little bit. We have a couple things that we want to take care of. We're going to break in just a little bit and get the members of the community a chance to come say welcome home. But before we do that, we also want to make sure we do our due recognition to the fellow whose footsteps you're following in today, and that's Mr. Mike Fine. We have a couple presentations, Mike, that we would like to make sure you know how much we've appreciated your service and your competent leadership and just everything you've done for us here at the district. So we have a few people in the audience that we would like to come forward. I see Chris Manning. Would you like to come forward, please? And Violetta. And Mr. Manning is representing Assemblymember Jose Medina.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Good evening, members of the board. Good evening, Mike. Good evening, Superintendent. On behalf of Assemblymember Jose Medina, it's my opportunity here to thank you for your service, Mike. In short, Jose Medina, who is a retired teacher from Poly High School, go Bears. He asked me to say that. I'm actually from Notre Dame, so I don't have any of that in me, but I'm a Titan. Anyway, moving on. He has the most esteemed pride in knowing you. He feels that you are the epitome of a leader. He says you set the example so high. He appreciates all your service and the fact that you are continually focused on the students. So he wanted me to personally thank you for your service, and I have a certificate of recognition to memorialize that. And would you like me to present it up here, or how would you like me to handle
We
that?
can
Madam
have Mike
President?
come down and
Okay,
we'll
thank
have
you.
some pictures then as well. Thank you, Chris. I don't think you should go very far, Mr. Fine. Hang on a sec.
Hi,
You got
good
a few
afternoon,
more.
Madam President, members of the board, Mike, new superintendent. My name is Violetta Aguilar-Wyrick, and I'm representing Senator Roth. And like Chris said, we just want to thank you on behalf of Senator Roth. In the last almost 2 years that we've been in the Senate, we've been having a lot of conversations, and your leadership, your knowledge has been greatly appreciated. Everything, the process, the LCAP, I mean, we are nationwide. We were recognized nationwide by your leadership, and thank you so much, Senator Roth, which is to say thank you and for everything that you've done for the district. And as a parent, thank you. So.
Thank you, Violetta. I think we did have another one from Mayor Bailey, who is not here yet. So we will just wait. Well, while we're waiting on that, then, or until we get, we have another one from our RUSD too. So, did you want to say something? Okay. Well, hang on a second, Mike. And I just found out that I am representing Mayor Bailey tonight. So, yeah. He grew his hair out, as you can see. So I just want to let you know this is from us. We have a signed certificate from Mayor Bailey. And this is to you, Mike. This is a certificate of recognition for your service to the Riverside Unified School District. So thank you very much. Thank you. Don't go anywhere. We couldn't be outdone by Mayor Bailey and the City of Riverside. So, of course, RUSD has its own honor that we would like to bestow upon you. And I just want to let folks know here tonight what an incredibly, incredibly, incredibly difficult decision we had to make as a board. And we want to let you know that we listened to you, we listened to the community, we talked with Mike. We knew Dr. Hansen would be a good fit as well, so it was very difficult. And we are very pleased that Mike has continued to stay on with us and in his always professional and courteous manner and his care for the kids and his care for his employees in his community. So we would like to bestow Mike this honor of the Riverside Unified School District Honor Roll. You get this. So this is our highest honor that we give to folks in the community for their service. So. So now I'm just going to stand down here because I don't want to go back up behind the dais. We're going to take about a 15-minute break, and we hope you can all join us in the hallway and here get to say hello to our new superintendent, talk to Mike, and we have some cake and punch, and everybody can get a chance to talk with each other. So 15 minutes. We'll be back at 6:05. Thank you.
Wants to say a couple words
Chris.
when we come back.
Chris.
Something's wrong with that clock. We were supposed to be back by 6:05. So, thank you, everybody. I hope everybody got a chance to thank Mike. I know Mrs. Cloud had a little something she wanted to add, and we didn't get a chance to listen. So if y'all can just take a minute and turn your attention to Mrs. Cloud, she has something she'd like to share.
Well, it's not often I have the floor to myself, but I just wanted to say before we broke that, I, for one, and I think I speak on behalf of the board, really appreciate your service to the board, your service to the district, and your service to the community. I think you reflect the best qualities of a gentleman, and that's used in a true and historical way. And thank you for your compassion and the love that you've shown RUSD. I don't think everybody understands how compassionate Mr. Fine is and how much he really will help a student in need. So I want to thank you.
It's true. I think Mike doesn't want anybody to know what a real softy he is at heart, but we all know. And also, I did want to pass along that Mrs. Allaby is out of town on a very long planned trip, and so she was not able to be here today. But she did, of course, in the last meeting express her admiration and thanks to Mr. Fine. And she also wanted to wish Dr. Hansen the best and wanted to let everybody know that she was in full support of the vote tonight, so even though she could not participate. So I just wanted to pass that all along. All right. Well, this is no fun. Now we got to get down to business. But actually, the next item is kind of fun, isn't it? All right. Mrs. Ramirez, will you please come forward and talk to us about the Reef Earthwatch expeditions?
I would love to. Good evening, Mrs. Lockdoss and Mr. Fine and members of the board. Since 2007, Reef has enjoyed an exciting partnership with the Earthwatch organization. Since that time, 22 teachers have been on an Earthwatch expedition. Over the past couple of years, I have been in direct conversation with our Earthwatch partners, and we have been able to grow our partnership. They have come to realize our teachers are top-notch here in RUSD and have focused additional funding our way. This year, we are sending a record-breaking 14 teachers out into the field. We are one of 2 districts in the nation given this privilege, the other being Los Angeles Unified School District. Earthwatch fellowships are made available for teachers who are passionate about teaching, excited about making a difference with their time and talents, and interested in conservation, environmental sustainability, and lifelong learning. By engaging teachers, Earthwatch strives to inspire and build a future generation of leaders who value the environment and prioritize it in their everyday choices. When teachers return from the field, they share their experiences with students, colleagues, families, and friends through stories, lessons, and community action. As an Earthwatch Fellow, this year each of our teachers will spend 1 to 2 weeks on an expedition alongside other teachers and develop skills and understanding around environmental concerns. Research tasks vary with each project, and they will be each trained on everything they need to know in the field. The goal is to prepare their return to our community with greater understanding and appreciation of the natural world. Around 50 teachers are typically selected and placed in teams with other educators. Each year, Earthwatch identifies projects for its program. This year, teachers will have an opportunity to study the impact of climate change in the cloud forest of Ecuador, in the desert of Arizona, and at the Arctic's edge in Canada. Those going to Ecuador and Arizona will be examining factors that affect interactions among plants, caterpillars, and their natural enemies. That would be me, probably. By comparing results from different sites, hypotheses will be tested about the effects of climate on interactions between caterpillars and parasites. In Canada, they will help uncover evidence of global warming and may even get to see a polar bear or two. Educator fellowships are awarded through a competitive application process. Included including review by the Earthwatch Review Panel, composed of past fellows from around the country. Fellows are assigned to projects according to their interest, skills, and availability, their project needs, and grant restrictions. We at REEF began our process in December when Mr. Fine forwarded the application and REEF guidelines to all our USD teachers. From there, their applications were sent directly to Earthwatch, who then forwarded us a list of the qualified applicants. And the REEF board each year holds interviews and is allowed to make the final choice. Each RUSD fellowship recipient has an Earthwatch program coordinator to provide them with the information needed to get into the field and what the program expects upon their return. The fellowship covers the full costs of the expedition, including meals, accommodations, research permits, equipment, and on-site transportation. Educator fellowships also provide a stipend to offset some of the out-of-pocket travel expenses to and from the expedition site. And this year, in addition to the typical $1,000, each was given an extra stipend to help cover those costs. In return for the fellowship, Earthwatch asks that each help support its mission and ensure its renewed funding by completing a volunteer evaluation at the end of the expedition. They are also asked to provide a field report within 30 days after the end of their trip, including excerpts from a personal journal, a thank you letter to the funder, copies of any media coverage received from their participation, and a lesson and a community plan. And one of the questions Reef asked them during our interview is how they plan to bring back their experience to directly impact our students. And I know in the past, it's been great to hear. One of them that sticks out to me was she was in a country where she didn't speak the language. And she talked about what an eye-opening experience that was for her. And how better she was to relate to the students in her class whose first language was not English. So our teachers come back with so much more than what they expect to when they leave. So tonight, it's my honor to introduce to you the Earthwatch Fellows for 2014. Not all of them can be here, but I'm going to read their names anyways, and I'll let you know where they're from and where they're going. So, and Jennifer Cow, is she here? Science teacher at Gage Middle School, will be traveling to Ecuador. Erin Garcia. Why don't you guys come up? Erin Garcia, a language arts teacher at University Heights Middle School, will be traveling to the Arctic's Edge. Adrian Gonzalez, also from Uni, is a science teacher, and he will be traveling to Arizona. Kristen Kund is a French teacher at Poly High School, who's also going to the Arctic Edge. Melinda Lang is a 5th grade teacher at Madison, who will be going to the Arctic Edge. Stephanie Nechayev, thank you. English teacher at Arlington High School is also going to the Arctic Edge. Brandy Parker, a science teacher at Frank Augustus Miller Middle School, will be traveling to Ecuador. Susan Preby, language arts teacher at Earhart, will be going to the Arctic's Edge, as will Tammy Super, who's a special ed teacher at Sierra. And Marisol Stokes is our first ever kindergarten teacher going on an Earthwatch expedition to Ecuador. Angelina Summer is a special ed teacher at Poly, traveling to Ecuador. Julie Olson is a band and avid teacher at Shamawa, and she will be going to the Arctic Edge. Carla Yanni is a 4th grade teacher at Kennedy, and will be going to the Arctic Edge. And Joe, where's Joe? Oh, there's Joe. An IB Mandarin teacher from John W. North High School will be traveling to Costa Rica. So please join me in wishing them a great trip and thanking them for what they're doing. Picture? Congratulations. Have fun. Do we want one side, being on the other? There we go. So upon their return, we'll have reports on our Facebook page and all kinds of that for you guys to see. Do you have any questions for anybody before they run out the door? Or me?
Mrs. Cloud?
I just have a question. How many did you say are going all together?
14.
No, I
this year.
mean, not from our district. I mean, Earth Watch.
They pick
altogether.
about 50.
So we have a pretty good representation.
We do. I think LAUSD has 20 going. So when you look at the size difference, we're going to be very well represented.
Yes, well, thank you all for volunteering, and I can't wait to hear your stories.
And see pictures,
Thank you.
too.
Yes.
Thank you.
Those of us frustrated with our inability to get out and go do field work anymore loves to see that stuff vicariously, so thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mrs. Ramirez. We've come to our part of the agenda where we accept public input on items that are not agendized. Anything not on the agenda, we will accept public input at this point, but I have not received any cards and I see none coming forward, so I am assuming we have no public input on items not on the agenda. We do have, moving on to our next item, our interim superintendent's announcement. Mr. Fine, do you have anything you would like to say today?
Mrs. Lockdawson, my only comment is just congratulations to our, to really all of our teachers in our schools. We had a great week last week of graduations and promotions. And as I shared with the staff, we start with setting our vision there as preschool teachers and kindergarten teachers and build upon that. And so last week was really just a celebration of what we do every day. And so congratulations to our staff and certainly to our kids, our students that we each got to greet. It's just a great week. Thank you.
I agree. I had the privilege of going to Polly's graduation with Mr. Fine, and we had a really good time there. Everything went really well, and we really enjoyed ourselves. And it's always a delight to see the product of all those years of work coming up on the stage and all the wonderful places they're off to.
And I know Mrs. Cloud has an instructional committee, subcommittee report.
Just real quick, we had a meeting on June 9th to discuss a couple of items. One is a transitional kindergarten, which we're really not tweaking too much this year, except that there are enough students in some of the schools to have full TK classes, even though the curriculum will be the same with those that have combination classes. Some schools actually have enough students now with 3 months of 5-year-olds. So that will be different this year. And any other changes we've reserved until the legislation gets completely worked through. The other thing we talked about was the dual language expansion, dual language immersion program expansion, that is. And I think we'll be talking about it later in the LCAP process. But just so the board knows that is coming, we've taken the community's concerns seriously, and we will be expanding the program. Mr. Lee, do you have anything else?
Do you have anything to add, Mr. Lee? Okay, thank you. Thank you both. And you're done, right, Mr. Fine? Okay, thank you. So moving on to our next section, we've got our, it's RASM, and it stands for, I know, Riverside Administrative
Association of School.
Dang it. Association of School Managers. You'd think 2 years on the board I would get that by now. I apologize. Ms. Diet-Allert will give us a report. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mrs. Lockdawson, Mr. Fine, and members of the board. It's been my pleasure to serve as RASM president this year, and our board members are outstanding colleagues. They deserve credit for their creativity, hard work, and can-do attitudes, and I can't say enough about how wonderful they are to work with. Throughout the year, we've continued to raise funds for student scholarships. We're able to offer an additional scholarship this year. We provided some opportunities for professional relationships and building leadership capacities, and continue to inform our members on current educational issues. As an AXA Region 19 charter group, we have encouraged AXA membership and participation in AXA leadership opportunities as well as training. The board has also appointed a communications media liaison for next year to keep our members better informed about important educational issues. So be sure to look for us on Twitter and Facebook. We're going viral here. Our board elections were online this year for the first time, and we had more people voting than ever, which really was impressive for us. We are planning our kickoff event in August, on August 15th, so you look for more information on that. We'll be managers on the move, thinking healthy and walking a lot more and doing some activities. Right now, I'd like to ask our newly elected RASM president, Bernie Merez, to introduce our next year's board, and he'll be followed by Gary Reller, our scholarship chairman, who will introduce our scholarship winners for 2013-14. Thank you.
Thank you, DeEtte. Good evening, Board President, Ms. Lock-Dawson, Mr. Fine, Superintendent, Dr. Hanson, board members. It's my pleasure as President of RASM to introduce the 2014-2015 board officers. If you could just wave those of you who are here. President-elect is Mike Rhodes. Vice President, Legislative Action Certificated, Gary Reller. Vice President, Legislative Action Classified, Orrin Williams. I don't know if he's here.
Yes, he is.
Is he here? Yes. Vice President, Membership Certificated, Michelle Cortez. I don't believe she's here. She's out of the country. Vice President, Membership Classified, Tracy Arner. She is not here as well. She was out on business. Secretary, Elizabeth Watanabe. Treasurer, Rebecca Brown. Vice President, Program Certificated, Lindsay Rosa. And our new position, Community Media Liaison, Victor Cisneros, and you are all familiar with DeEtte Allard, our past president. As DeEtte said, we are really excited about the upcoming year and to build and boost morale and support the vision of the school board. At this time, I'd like to introduce Gary Reller, our scholarship chairman, who will introduce our scholarship winners for the 2013-2014 school year.
President Lock-Dawson, Mr. Fine, members of the board. Before I start to announce our scholarship winners for the year, I want everyone to know that these scholarships would not be possible if it wasn't for the generous donations of our certificated and classified managers and confidential employees in Riverside Unified. As Mrs. Allard alluded to, we're increasing our scholarships this year by one, so we will be awarding 4 scholarships to classified, certificate, or confidential employees' children, as well as 2 scholarships for the arts for all our USD students. So I'm going to start with our first scholarship recipient. The first recipient is Andrew Angulo. Andrew wasn't able to be here with us this evening because he's out of state and working to earn some money for school. He is the son of the principal at Ramona High School, Dr. Jamie Angulo, and I'm not sure if he's here. She's here this evening. We'll get her. We'll get Andrew's scholarship to him. The next scholarship winner is Kristen Cortez. And she is the daughter of Michelle Cortez, who's the Assistant Personnel Administrative Director for Certificated Personnel. Kristen, can you come up? And Kristen is going to be attending the University of Redlands and majoring in communicative disorders. And just on a side note, her sister is here with her this evening, Monica Cortez, and on another side note, I was her 8th grade U.S. history teacher. The next scholarship winner is Gabrielle Sheffield, if Gabrielle could come up, as well as her mother, Dr. Lynn Sheffield, who is a principal of John W. North High School, and she will be going to Azusa Pacific and majoring in business management. Our next scholarship recipient is Holly Woods, if Holly could come up, as well as Robin Woods, who is the confidential secretary for the Department of Personnel, Leadership, and Development. And Holly will be attending Fisk University and majoring in pre-med. Again, all of those scholarships were given to children of Riverside Unified School District, confidential, certificated, and classified managers' children. The following scholarships are awarded to any RUSD student who is going to be majoring in the arts in college, and this is the Riverside Association of School Managers Scholarship for the Arts. And the first recipient I would like to bring up is Rebecca Nelson, as well as her mom and dad, Jim and Odalisa Nelson. And Rebecca will be going to BYU and majoring in stage management and events planning. And our final recipient in the Art Scholarship is Franklin Del Priori. If Frank could come up, as well as his dad, Dr. Lawrence Blackman. Frank will be going to UCR and majoring in art. Lastly, I'd like to, again, thank those managers, certificated and classified, as well as our confidential employees who have donated to these to the scholarships that we're able to award each and every year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eller. And thank you, parents, all of you who support your kids in these endeavors and set them up for success. So thank you very much. Let's give a round of applause to all the parents. All right, moving on to our next item. This is our consent agenda, where we take routine items. Somebody want to make a motion? Or, yeah. I've had a request to pull items F2 and F3. These items are being pulled and continued pending further discussions with our next superintendent, and they will be back to us in July. So I guess maybe in our July 28th meeting, I think they'll be coming back to us.
I have, Mrs. Lightosson?
Yes.
I would like to pull F10 for some clarification.
Okay, and item F10, we will also pull. All right, Mr. Hunt?
I was just making a motion to approve.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of item F10 and with the continuation of items F2 and F3.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Please vote. Okay, and Mrs. Cloud, would you like to discuss item F10, please?
Well, I just had a question, a clarification. You know, those CIF representatives have always been interesting. And just clarify, I thought that principals were quite often our representatives. So that's why I was wondering, because we have superintendent, deputy, and assistant. Is that a change?
Well, actually, yeah. It's fairly recent change. It's I think this is the second year that now they ask for the superintendent and as the primary designee to CIF in terms of issues and voting that occasionally needs to take place, as well as Mr. Fine, who's listed on there as one of those two designees. And in the past, it's been it's been me listed, but there's going to be somebody new, so that's why that appears that way.
Okay, will that give us more clout now?
You want my honest answer?
Okay, I understand. Well, I thank you for the clarification. And with that, I move approval.
Thank you. So we have a motion, a second to approve item F10. Mrs. Cloud and Mr. Hunt, could you please vote? Thank you. All right, item F10 passes. Thank you, Dr. Ermert, for that clarification. All right, moving on to our next item. There's a lot of consent. We have a couple items which we will receive reports on and have an opportunity to discuss. I think this one is Mr. Walker to discuss with us the review of the Education Code policies, procedures, and practices related to student discipline. This is in response, I think, to board members' requests to hear more about what our policies are regarding.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Madam President, members of the board, Mr. Fine, I'm here this evening to discuss issues related to policies and procedures and practices in the Riverside Unified School District, as well as primary focus by myself for the Education Code that drives discipline for students in schools. As part of the presentation, after my delivery of some information for you, we will have three principals come up and provide some information of their works at the school sites, of actually using discipline at the schools. So, let's see if this is going to work this evening. Very good. There we go. So before you is the suspension definition of the Education Code 48900 drives discipline within the arena of schools, and suspension means removal of a student for ongoing instruction for adjustment purposes. A conference is held with any student who is suspended. The pupil shall be informed of the reason for the disciplinary action and the evidence against him or her, and shall be given the opportunity to present his or her version of the evidence in his or her defense. Reasonable effort is made to contact the parent. The parent is notified of the suspension in writing, so we have a suspension form that's provided. In the last 2 years, there has been a focus on 48900K, which we'll talk about in a minute, throughout the state. As a matter of fact, AB 420, although inactive, is an effort to limit or remove K violations from the Education Code. Future legislative action is expected in this particular area. In talking about 48900K, it is disruption or defiance. 48900K, disrupted school activities or otherwise willfully defy the valid authority of personnel. Examples of disruption would include you have to empty a classroom. Instruction stops for what would be considered a substantial period of time. Multiple students are involved in an escalation of behavior at the school. Examples of defiance would be is continually asked over a period of time or told to do something and the child refuses or defies authority by failure to act. There is a particular standard known as the Tinker standard that is utilized in looking at this type of behavior. There's a concern over the use of 48900, and it's primarily due to disproportionate suspensions of particular subgroups of pupils. Taken from EdSource, an analysis of the 30 largest districts found huge disparities in their reliance on willful defiance to suspend students, with some districts citing it as a reason for more than 2/3 of their suspensions and others less than 1/3. Statewide, suspensions in California for willful defiance dropped from 48% of all suspensions in 11-12 to 43 in 12-13. You're going to see some data related to not only our USD but surrounding districts as we move along. You may have heard that LAUSD will no longer suspend students for willful defiance. Came out on May 15th of 2013, and the Board of Action took steps at that point in time to vote 5-2 to ban suspensions for defiance following an impassionate discussion. So already one of our largest districts in the state has done away with the 48900K for willful defiance. They had a zero tolerance standard at that point in time, and again, based on the potential for discrimination, it was determined that they would do away with that. You'll see on the next page that San Francisco intends to employ a similar action with the start of the 14-15 school year, where the willful defiance as a reason to expel or suspend students will be eliminated from use in the San Francisco Unified School District. Again, this starts with the 14-15 school year. When we look at 48900, there's also 48900.5, where suspensions, including supervised suspension at school, as described in the Ed Code, shall be imposed only when other means of correction fail to bring about proper conduct. So what you're seeing is that there has to be attempts now to try things in advance before suspension is utilized, moving away from a more punishment perspective to one where you are applying discipline in a manner where it's supportive to students with a focus on keeping them in school. So it shall only be imposed when other means of correction fail to bring about the proper conduct expected. However, a pupil, including an individual with exceptional needs as defined in the section, may be suspended for any of the reasons enumerated in 48900 upon first offense if the principal or superintendent of schools determines the student violated section A, B, C, D, or E of the 48900 and that the pupil's presence causes a danger to persons of the school. (48900.5b) from the Education Code enumerates the corrections that may be included but is not limited to. And I'm not going to go through all of these. They're articulated in your document and they're available in the board agenda for the public. A few of them: conference between school personnel and the parent and the pupil themselves, referral to the counselors, study teams, referral of comprehensive psychological testing for Section 504 or IDEA, enrollment in a program for teaching pro-social behaviors, participation in restorative justice program, other alternative means as described in the section for point 6, which includes community service can be provided, and we can get creative and do other things at the school site as determined by the principal. Under V, the pupil is subject to discipline under 48900. A superintendent of school or principal may use his or her discretion to provide alternative to suspension or expulsion that are age appropriate and designed to correct the pupil's specific misbehavior as specified. This also can go then, the corrective means of alternative means of correction can go into the child's file. We use it in the ARIES section, and it can be noted in a drop-down form. You will not see it on a suspension form because the student is not being suspended. They're being provided with alternative means of correction. In RUSD and other districts, it's highly recommended that and discouraged that you suspend for truants and tardies, the students already out of school. So it is the intent of the legislature that alternatives to suspension and expulsion be imposed for those who are tardy or truant. On this page, you'll see some data relative to when we started to take some action to address the issues of the use of K violations. Previously, Ks were marked off pretty much as a course of action for almost anything that occurred. So with clarification through staff development and with council providing in-service training to our administrators, you can see some data related here. If you look at the second box, the defiance of suspension or out-of-school suspensions, this is related to Ks. You can see that we went in 11-12 from 2,117 K violations that resulted in suspensions to 159 in 12-13. Other suspensions in school from 81 went up a little bit because they were using alternative means. And total suspensions for out-of-school dropped almost 300 from 3,353 to 3,056. At that same time, our expulsions for defiance dropped from 5 to 2, and the total number of expulsions dropped in the district from 174 to 122. So quite a bit of action in the positive manner as we started to employ alternative means of correction. The 2 defiance expulsions, what we utilize within our district is if a child reaches 20 days of suspension, we can, of course, do what's called an involuntary transfer because the Ed Code allows us to take them up to 30 days. But if it's an action that is potentially dangerous, at that point in time, the child may be put up for expulsion.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
I have a question from Mr. Hunt.
Yes.
If I could, Mr. Walker, just going back to a little bit at the beginning when you talked about when a student has caused disruption, we make a reasonable effort to contact their parents. I just always have been concerned when I read your reports that so often, more than often, it says, you know, representative for the student was none. Are they not showing up, or I mean,
For which portion?
for the hearings that we have?
Well, this isn't in relation to the hearings. This is at the time of the suspension. So when the child is being suspended and the investigation is going on, the school takes deliberate efforts to try to contact the parent to let them know what's going on, to get them to the school, because the student may or may not be suspended at that point in time. So, but as far as the actual hearings, we do have rather good attendance in our hearings and our pre-expulsion review committee meetings. There are some parents who do not show up because of the timelines associated with holding those hearings and getting the action to the board related to a recommendation for expulsion from the principals. We only have a certain amount of time to get it done. We do not suspend those meetings at that point in time. The parent's been given due notice that goes through certified mail. We're in contact with them through phone, so if they choose not to attend the hearing itself, the hearing does go forward so we can maintain our timelines and get that action to you in a timely manner.
Clarifying that your timeline is a legally set mandate?
That's correct.
And
unless the parent requests a extension, at that point in time, the timelines are off the table.
I'm going to assume that these parents are all interested, but they're probably at work.
Well, again, there's different reasons why people do not show up, but it's not a major issue. Most of those hearings are attended by a family member or a parent that take place in our office.
And it's always during the 8 to 5 sort of time?
Yes.
Okay. And then I have had some folks in the minority community, and even one of our peers over on the Alvord board. Let's go back to L.A. and now let's say San Francisco. Really strange they're going to do this, but do you look at also for, as we just are finalizing putting the cover page on our LCAP, do you look at ethnicity? And then the 3 areas, the fosters, the ELs, and the poverty level, and is it disproportionate?
You're going to see a little bit of information related to our top 3 areas of ethnicity as we go through this PowerPoint.
Well, I can wait for that if you like.
In regard to your comment about LA and San Francisco, I think they're being proactive in regard to the efforts of AB 420, where the Dickerson bill was seeking to limit or eliminate the use of 48900K within the Ed Code. There is anticipation within the community of educators that at some point in time will disappear because people use a subjective analysis rather than going with the legal analysis that's been provided.
So you think that will happen?
I personally think it will happen at some point in time. I can't give you a timeline, but with LA and San Francisco, 2 of our larger districts taking action voluntarily to remove it, I think you will see it removed from the Ed Code at some point in time, especially the defiance.
To my colleagues, I serve on the legislative, as you know, on your behalf, on the legislative committee for CSBA, and members of that committee, including Ben Johnson, who are a minority, are very strong on this point. And it's just something that I'm glad Tim taking a view, keeping an eye on it. It seems to be a burgeoning problem.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Lockdawson. Thank you, Mr. Walker.
On the next page, this data that I just provided for you, which by the way comes from CalPADS and was taken directly from the CDE website, demonstrates what we have in relation to out-of-school suspensions and that reduction between the 2 years resulting in about 300 less out-of-school suspensions. And you also see that bar graph related to our reduction of 52 expulsions between 11-12 and 12-13. Going to the next slide, you see a comparison. Once we started with the focus on reducing the number of K violations and not using K as a catch-all for any of the suspensions, but using it appropriately when it was warranted, this taking place under the supervision and support of Dr. Miller at the time, we, in the 2 years that are demonstrated here between 11-12 and 12-13, have comparable data, including the state average across surrounding school districts. So if you take a look at the first bar graph, that is Riverside Unified School District. Our K violation suspensions in 11-12 was 2,117. That dropped down to 159 in 12-13. And it gives comparable data for Coronanoco, Moreno Valley, and RCOE. This data that you see next on the list is going to provide you with a focus on staff development started in 10-11, and by the time we got to 11-12, we were laying down some groundwork that would lead to us beginning to have a better understanding at the school sites of what we were doing related to Ks. And this is district totals by ethnicity. Mr. Hunt asked a moment ago, if you take a look again of the out-of-school suspensions, the third number over, you can see that out-of-school suspensions in 11-12 for Hispanics, which represented 24,000 plus in our district, was 1,366. African Americans was 330. And the Caucasians were 355. A representative look at that is, if you take the Caucasians, which is just about half of the Hispanics, it does not represent half of that number. Actually, it is about one quarter of that number. Here you see some disproportionality of the use of K at that point in time for the Hispanic population and the African American population related to the Caucasian population, even here within RUSD at that moment in time. If you look at the data related to 12-13, you're going to see some changes that take place, substantial changes. Other suspensions, suspensions for out of school, again, the third number over, if you will recall, was 1,366 the year before, it was 97. For African Americans, it was 330, it dropped down to 21. And for the Caucasians, it was 355, it dropped down to 37. So a substantial drop. And now if you look at the Caucasian compared to Hispanic, now we're down to a third rather than a quarter. This data is then represented here in a bar graph to give you a better view of what took place. These are all suspensions for out of schools between those 2 years for the Hispanic, the African American, and the Caucasian populations. This next bar graph shows the suspension rate for Riverside Unified School District and our surrounding, and these are for full suspensions out of school and covering all of the areas enumerated in 48-900 of the Education Code, A through T, I think it goes up to. And what you can see is, as our action began to play with focus on suspensions, what we're doing, alternative means of correction, our trainings that are being provided, our push to have schools inherit and to adopt positive behavior intervention strategies. We see that we had a suspension rate of 7 in 11-12, 7%, and it dropped down to 4.8% in 12-13. That is a reduction of 2.2. Overall, we then dropped down below the state average, which dropped 0.6 at that same point in time. So we caught up and went below the state average, and we dropped everyone else in our surrounding area. Of course, we had some room to go, so we dropped 2.2. It will be interesting to see what happened this year after the data is collected. With Corona Norco already low at 3.3, they still went down by 0.3 to 2.9% for their suspensions. So obviously they had a little head start on us in regard to these movements for alternative means of correction instead of suspensions. During the period of time that is in question here, we had training given to sites over a 2-year period and revolving around an understanding of 48,900. There were multiple efforts out of pupil services in collaboration with the administrators at the school sites and others throughout the district to look over and reestablish our sequential discipline guidelines through pupil services. Those committees got together at least 2 times during those 2 years and revised those. I have a copy of those for you if you would like them. I'll leave them with you this evening. Discipline and suspensions, perks and administrative hearing panels. We did some trainings through pupil services, and our hearing officer came in to give those trainings. Those trainings were provided to our administrators throughout the school district. Alternative means of corrections and requirements, and the application of those at the school site was provided by our pupil services staff to administrators throughout the school district. And then the 48,900 case suspensions were defined by our legal personnel who came in and did a training for all of our school administrators. Chris Keeler is our supporting person. And per the legal analysis and training by our attorney, these definitions were given. Substantial disruption is defined as learning stops or preventing learning for a significant period of time, with many students are involved. And willful defiance is after alternative means of correction, and dependent on the situation, willfully defying the authority when asked by staff to do or to not do something. So those are the definitions. Also at the same period of time, Andy Stekovich, a staff developer out of the Pupil Services Special Education Department, gave numerous and continues to give numerous opportunities for teachers to be offered trainings in the area of discipline for classroom management, and that will be something that we again focus on next year. So during Chris's training, he also provided what 48,900 case suspensions are not. They are not because the behavior disrupted an administrator by requiring some action be taken, or it took a lot of administrative time. That might have been utilized as a definition in the past, but that's not the definition. And willful defiance is not because the behavior violates rules of a student handbook, even if a student signed it as acknowledgement. It comes straight from the Ed Code. It has not interfered with instruction for a short period of time. And although this is not something that we may all sign on to, that's the legal definition. Teacher suspension from class. I wanted to just throw this in here because in the Ed Code there is the opportunity for teachers to suspend a student from their class. 48910 Section A provides a teacher may suspend any pupil from class for any of the acts enumerated in 48900 for the day of the suspension and the following day. And the teacher shall immediately report the suspension to the principal of the school and send the pupil to the principal or the designee of that principal for appropriate action. If that action requires the continued presence of the pupil at the school site, the pupil shall be under appropriate supervision as defined in policies and regulations adopted by the governing board. And this is in our regulations. As soon as possible, the teacher shall ask the parent or the guardian of the pupil to attend a parent-teacher conference regarding the suspension, and a school administrator shall attend the conference if the teacher or the parent or guardian requests that they be there. The pupil shall not be returned. I'm sorry, I've got to keep up with you. The pupil shall not be returned to the class from which he or she is suspended during the period of the suspension without the concurrence of the teacher of the class and the principal. A pupil suspended from a class shall not be placed in another regular class during the period of the suspension. However, if the pupil is assigned to more than one class, so when you're transitioning at middle school or high school, on the same day, they cannot go into a class that is scheduled at the same time, but they may attend their other classes. A teacher may also refer a pupil for any of the acts enumerated in 48-900 to the principal or designee for the principal's consideration of a suspension at school. The student may return to that classroom after the period of the suspension, so it's not something that can be repeated, and the student cannot be suspended again until a conference takes place with the parent and or the student.
Mr. Walker, Mrs. Cloud
Yes.
has a question.
Thank you. I thank you that I didn't know that Mr. Keeler had come and done a presentation. Was it to principals and site administrators, district administrators? I think that's very helpful. I'm glad we're looking at this carefully. I think we need to make sure that we give each student the benefit of the doubt and that we do everything we can to enhance their classroom learning. But I would say we also need to remember we have a responsibility to enhance the learning of the other 30 kids in the class as well. And I've heard from staff and teachers that at some schools there's concern about that some of these procedures aren't followed as closely as they probably should be. And they just get frustrated at administration and throw up their hands and keep kids in class, which does disrupt the learning of other kids. So my request would be is that we make sure that each teacher can be supported for the kinds of behavior, because as you know, as we're looking at the suspension expulsion reports, we see some pretty mean behavior, and some of it is directed at teachers. So we need to make sure that in our effort to aid each and every student, we are protecting our students and the rest of our classroom kids as well. This is just a cautionary tale. I've heard out there that this has been a rough year in many quarters. So I hope that we're doing everything we can to follow through on a procedure that nobody's throwing away, that at some schools the teachers feel like the APs are throwing away the suspension requests and all. So we need to make sure that they feel supported and that everybody is aware of the kinds of procedures we have in place. And then again, this shows the need for probably more counselors as well.
Well,
and then I have a quick question.
Sure.
I was looking, what is participation in a restorative justice program?
Well, again, restorative justice is obviously an ongoing issue where instead of punishing someone, you provide them with the opportunity to improve themselves in manners that are not punitive in nature. It's a large movement within the criminal justice system. So rather than locking someone away, you give them the opportunity to go through counseling and therapy in order to provide them with positive reinforcers and strategies that will allow them to change their behavior and to become contributing members of society. So the same thing with this. It would be a focus on looking at providing that child with an opportunity to have therapeutic groups and counseling opportunities, which would assist in evaluating their behaviors and giving them some strategies that might be alternatives to anger management, might be an example where they can control themselves and make better decisions the next time around.
Well, I certainly believe in restorative justice, but does that mean like if you overturn trash cans across campus, you can make the student go back and pick up all the trash? Or is that out of the bounds of...
Well, again, I wouldn't respond to that particular example as a means of restorative justice, but it's certainly something that a child could volunteer for if they saw the errors of their way.
Okay, thank you.
I do want to say that we will continue with our efforts to provide ongoing trainings. We have turnovers in administrative and teaching staff. and out of pupil services, we will continue the focus to provide those trainings. At the same time, Mr. Fine can verify that we continue to provide opportunities for positive behavior intervention strategy training, which is a school-wide implementation of strategies that everyone buys into, which has been seen across the United States to be extraordinarily impactful in turning behaviors around and holding students accountable for the very things that you brought to the attention of the audience tonight.
I do see that. Some of the character counts kinds of programs have done that.
Well, actually, that was my question, was not just in our schools, but nationwide, or folks that research this kind of thing. Has anybody looked at difference in expulsion rates, suspension rates in schools that have employed a type of character counts program or these other life skill programs? And has anybody done any kind of comparative analysis?
I'm sure that the data exists out there. I don't have it available this evening.
I'd be interested to see. I'm sure somebody's looked at that and just seen how those, particularly probably the people that created those programs.
Yeah. Well, if you can see some of the movement that we've made to the positive here, and still we have a ways to go in regard to implementing some specific strategies across the district. But we've made great strides in the reduction of the number of suspensions and expulsions in our district. We want to take efforts to continue this. Our new superintendent coming in actually has a district with a lower percentage rate than ourselves, so I'm sure he has strategies that he will ask to be employed, and I look forward to that conversation.
Thank you. Mr. Hunt has a question.
I just want to comment that I wanted to commend Mr. Walker and Dr. Miller and the staff for a strategy of redefining 48,900K. I think that's in the great spirit of LCAP, really, and keeping, as Mrs. Cloud often talks about, keeping kids in the classroom is so important. That's where they get the education. So I do commend you for that, and thank you for your hard work. I would, with the superintendent's approval, I would ask that it be an opportunity for Mr. Walker to present to some of our minority supergroups here in town, like the Latino Network. Ophelia, in fact, cornered me the other day. There hasn't been anybody from RUSD there in a while, and I think this would be an important presentation. I think you know the head of the NAACP, and maybe she can arrange for a meeting. But I think you're condensing this some and explaining that we're working not to have this shotgun approach, but to really do the pruning where the pruning is needed, and the others we're trying to the restorative is a good thing. And again, in the spirit of the LCAP that Mr. Fine led for us. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Okay. You have a couple administrators that you'd like to
Yes, so it's a good segue as we move from the talk about the global issues related to discipline to three colleagues that have I use the word volunteered, but we actually talked to them and asked them to come on behalf of supporting this presentation this evening.
That would be called voluntold.
No, we only asked a couple of people, and all of them were more than willing to come here and to assist and support us in this presentation. It truly is a collaborative effort between the school sites and my office, even though the work is often not of the most positive nature. So we asked them to come from three different levels: elementary, middle, and high school, and we'll go in that order. Tonight we're going to have Esther Garcia, Principal of Liberty, Raul Oyer from Chamawa, and also Daryl Hansen from King High School. They're going to come up, and we asked them to focus on three things: the benefits of the alternative means of correction, why it is good for children, what alternative means are being utilized at their sites, and I'm sure they can expand upon that at your request and through your questions, and how do you train your staff at the site, because training can certainly be provided at a district-wide level, but we expect and we would support training at the school sites as well. Just like out of my office, we participate in co-administrative meetings, attend principals meeting, and give strategies and suggestions and definitions of Ed Code to our principals. They then go back and provide it to their administrative staff because everybody can't be away from the site at the same time, even when we provide multiple opportunities for them to do so. So those are the things they're going to focus on, and I'd like to welcome this evening Esther Garcia to come to the podium. Thank you.
I'm much shorter than he is. Good evening, Mrs. Lock-Dodson, Mr. Fine, members of the board, and I'm just going to briefly talk about what we do at Liberty Elementary School. As a no excuses school, one of the systems that we are asked to implement is the shift from discipline to behavior. And that is to teach, instead of always disciplining the children and implementing punitive consequences, to change it to behavior and teach the children and model the behavior we want them to exhibit. We do implement the character counts, the being friendly, trustworthy, respectful, and responsible. And we focus this past year on being respectful, teaching the kids how to be respectful and responsible. And each year we will implement one more character and focus on the character. Liberty takes the first 20 days of the school year, we call them the first 20, to really work very hard on modeling respect and responsibility and all of the character traits. So that's one of the things that we do. That's an alternative model that we use at Liberty. And the other thing that we do is we have borrowed on several occasions the behavior plan from the special education program, the positive behavior plan, so that I do modify that plan for my most challenging students in general education. So we do meet with the parents, we tell the parents our expectations, and we do tell them that our job is to model how to behave, and we do give parents some resources that they can also use at home so that they can too teach them how to behave. The other thing that we also do is we implemented the Big, Hairy, Audacious goal. In teaching the kids how to behave, it's not going to take us 1 year or even 2 years. At my prior school, it took me 4 years to really see a big difference in the way children behave. One of the pieces of our Big, Hairy, Audacious goals is last year at the end of the year, I met with my leadership team, and they in turn talked to their colleagues and their teams in developing the rules and expectations for the children. And so the part of the character counts is the teachers say what is it that they want. When children are walking in the line, what rules must we follow when walking in line? But the teacher must also be committed to doing the hard work and teaching the kids how to walk in line everywhere we go. The last piece of our code of conduct is called a code of conduct. It's probably year 2, year 3. It's even talking to the kids about even restroom etiquette, because we know that they can get in big trouble in the restrooms. That's one of our biggest places where kids get in trouble. But those are some of the things that we do. We implement systems for behavior under our code of conduct, and the code of conduct is completely 100% written by our teachers. At the beginning of the year, during our first 20, instead of allowing the kids to play for the 20-minute recess, one of my Title I teachers will come out and we do an assembly. All of my first grade and second grade kids, we sit them around the tetherball and we teach them how to play tetherball and the rules. And we do each day we teach one of the new games until we cover every single game on the playground. And then at the end of the first 20, we give them the actual booklet so that they can take home, talk to their parents. I do expect my parents to sign. We do remind parents and send phone calls that they haven't signed their code of conduct. And if a parent refuses to sign it, then I sign it for the child. So it's a commitment between the child and I. So we do a lot of that, but the main focus for us is shifting from discipline to teaching them how to behave. And I saw very positive results on my other side, and I'm beginning to see very positive results at Liberty too.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Oh, Mr. Ayala.
Good evening, President-elect Dawson, Mr. Fine, members of the board. I'm going to stick to the 3 questions that were posed to us by Mr. Walker, and I want to talk to you about the types of alternate means that we provide to students at Chemawa. First one is we take advantage of our STOP program, our short-term optional placement program over at Lincoln. So when we have those students, provided on the consequence and the infraction at the school site, we take advantage of it and we send them there in lieu of suspension, where they complete work. Chemawa also has our WEB program, and that's an acronym for Where Everybody Belongs. And so what we try to do there is try to teach our 8th grade students some leadership abilities. They actually are assigned to a cohort of 7th grade students, and so they kind of indoctrinate them into secondary school and middle school. And they also meet with them throughout the year to talk about our behavior expectations, what they should be doing as a student, the behaviors that we want to see exhibited. Other things that we do is providing, I think my colleague said it well, is just dealing with that behavior and how to reshape that behavior with our students. And so it's always like trying to hold a carrot beyond them, something that they're willing to work towards. So we provide them with leadership opportunities. They could be a TA in a classroom, but they have to earn those kinds of responsibilities. Being at a school site where we have an emotionally disturbed program as well, my learning curve this year has just been tremendous. Because there's some things that you do with those kinds of students that are counterintuitive to what you would do. And trying to work with our staff and teach them how to do that with our kids, because your first inclination might be to openly direct and tell a student not to do something, but that's the opposite. You need to do actually the opposite. So I've learned a lot from our ED teachers and Mr. Stetkovich, who Mr. Walker mentioned as well. And so that's the one thing we control, is how do we act or how do we react to that behavior so that we de-escalate it as opposed to making it worse. We also take advantage of our youth accountability team over at CRC, and their goal is to reduce truancy, delinquent incidents on campus, and even reduce juvenile substance abuse. So we sent 14 of our students, referred them to the YAT program, where they get that kind of support with our DA's office, with our probation department. They come into the school sites and they actually check up on the students and they follow them and they talk to them about academics, they talk to them about behaviors. So that's another added support. And some of our parents really welcome that because they're at a loss as to what they can do. And so we try to provide some services and support to them. This year, thanks to Mr. Fine, Chemawa was one of the first schools to start a soccer team. They've done this in the past, but what was different this year is that we ended up with 2 boys and a girls team. And we did some play. We actually went out to Corona Norco and played one of their middle schools as well. And the benefits that we saw there is just what you talked about, Mr. Hunt, is getting kids connected to school and to activities. We tied it to academics. They have to have a great GPA. We tied it to behavior. Our coaches met with them. And I've never seen students turn around so much a GPA or their behavior to be involved in that kind of activity because it's the passion that they have. And so as long as we find that interest in that passion, and then we can provide that to students in that structure, we can teach them those pro-social behaviors that we want them to exhibit. The other thing that we do, my right hand is right over here, Mrs. Rosa, my assistant principal, is discipline chats, going into classrooms, being visible, holding ourselves to a higher standard, modeling for our students the behavior that we expect to see at all times. And so we talk to them and make those connections with them. Tie it to our 8th grade activities as well. Kids have to earn those. And how do they earn those? Being a good student, exhibiting, again, those behaviors that we want, that we value. My colleague also talked about the SST process, or the student success team. So when we have students that exhibit those kinds of behaviors, we call a parent-teacher conference, we refer them for behavior, and we talk about interventions, and we monitor those to make sure that we get the end result, which is improved behavior. This year, I also put our teachers into teams. One of the teams that is the culture team, and their job, I asked them to work on a short-term goal before the end of this year, and also to look at a long-term goal for next year. And so as a result of that, what our team decided to do is we were handing out tickets for good behavior that we saw exhibited. And those tickets would go into a drawing, and kids would be pulled out of their, called from their 7th period, and then we would reward them. And we saw a great benefit of that, and just to kind of, as a short term, just to set the groundwork for our positive behavior support system, which will be school-wide next year, headed by our assistant principal. And this system, it'll be school-wide, and our goal is to eliminate those challenging behaviors and replace them with pro-social behaviors. And we are partnering with UCR, the work there with Dr. Vanderwood, and I forget her name, Gerhardt. I know her last name. And our goal there is we want to reinforce or make being good, reinforce that being good is. I'm at a loss for words. So let me just read what I wrote because I think I got to take my foot out of my mouth here. So make it more reinforcing to be good. And to teach some universal behavioral expectations through reinforcement, having a bank for those reinforcements, and making the link between behavior and academic outcomes. That when behavior is good and you're doing what you need to do as a student, that you're going to see an improved outcome as far as grade is concerned. And for most kids, once you make that connection, the light kind of goes on for them. And again, tie it to a reinforcement menu. So that's the first part. How does it benefit? How does this benefit students? Our ultimate goal, like Mrs. Cloud said, is to keep kids in school. And we want to reduce such suspensions, obviously. And then we want to establish a culture that focuses on prevention. We don't want to give students the outcomes that they desire, because many of these kids will tell you, suspending, that's what I want. And so it's not giving them what they want. And move away from something that is a system that is punishing, or and again, move more towards reinforcement and to model those behaviors. And I often tell my assistant principal, we often deal with 5% of our population, which continue to be challenging for us. And my words to her is always, don't forget about the other 95%. Those are the kids that are doing what they need to be doing, and those are the kids that we need to be recognizing. Those are the behaviors that we need to be putting out there for our students. So WEB helps us do that, and our system school-wide next year will also allow us to do that. Lastly, how do we communicate this to our staff? The alternate means through our handbook, staff handbook, presenting to our staff the whole system. We also share with them discipline data so they can see what are some things that we're dealing with and some of the things that we need to get better at or problem solve to improve on our campus. And again, ultimately, we just want to change the mindset of our staff from a punitive mindset to a culture that focuses on prevention.
So, Madam President, Mr. Fine, members of the board, and Dr. Hanson. It'll take a little bit to get used to, Dr. Hanson. Thank you very much for having us up here. My colleagues have said pretty much the same way as that we address it at King High School. And I'm looking at the three questions that we were asked of what types of alternate means of correction are we using at our school. The biggest thing we're doing is our focus is to try to keep them in class and to keep students deal with the issue, deal with it quickly and as fast as we can so we can get them returned to class. It's no different than in the athletic mode of practices. They're not going to learn if they're not at practice, and they're not going to learn if they're not in class. We use our MFI and our school psychologists as often as possible to refer students to that program, those programs, so they have somebody to talk to. We're using staff and our staff personnel and our school resource officer. We this year got her much more involved in talking to students and using it almost as a counseling piece so they could hear from, not just hearing from an assistant principal over and over and over, but hearing from other people on our site. A school at the high school level and when a school, say the size of King, often what we're dealing with is conflict and conflict resolution. We have our peer mentor program that is a class of students that are in the program dealing with talking to students about conflict resolution and how to get through difficult situations. We also use our link group programs for those. The first time I got to King and I first started hearing about this, but we've had good success with it, is our no contact contracts. So if you're just having a problem with another student, we bring the two students together and we put them on a contract to try to keep them, put some boundaries until we could work this out. So they're not constantly just running each other and repeating these problems. Biggest thing is the ongoing follow-ups. To talking to my administrative team about once we recognize that a student is repeatedly coming to our office for different things, that not only are we dealing with that we're following it up and checking with them and seeing how they are doing. And it's an approach to be much more proactive than reactive and try to head it off before it becomes a major issue. As for how do we see using alternate means benefiting our students, we do a lot of talk about helping to build self-esteem and try to create positive relationships. This approach helps students to understand how to make the correct choices and to give them a better understanding that we're there as adults on the campus to help them get through difficult situations, not just deal with them once they've caused a problem. And to go away from jumping straight to a punitive approach and move into much more into to demonstrate that the adults are there to support them in their efforts to get through the high school level. Many of the things that we're doing, the benefits, the LCAP does kind of align when we talk about creating the counseling program and stuff, so students can have someone that they can talk to. We've had a lot of conversation about our visits to Santiago High School and their counseling program, where students, after every suspension before returning to class, meets with a counselor to discuss what they did wrong and see if they can learn from that, so we're not continually repeating those struggles. And then how are we educating our staff? At King, we make it part of our staff meetings every month, where we look at and giving them different discipline tools to deal with situations in the classroom. At the beginning of the year, we also start every year with classroom presentations, so students can see what our expectations are. And the biggest change we're making for next year, which I'm kind of excited about, and it just happened to fit in when I got the call to ask to speak here tonight, was our discipline committee, which we're starting next year. Teachers did come to me and say they wanted to be more part of some of the decision-making process and the discussions that are going on with discipline. So we're creating a discipline committee with our teachers, and in that committee we're going to go over some of the programs and some of the things that we're offering. We're going to look at data and trends that are going on our campus. Often discipline follows in a trend mode, and you will see different things repeated over and over during different times, so we can have that discussion and start talking as a staff about how we're going to deal with those things. And by doing that and meeting bi-monthly, gets them much more a part of the discipline program. And it's not just now we're sending students out of class, but we start working as a team together of how we're going to deal with those things. Okay?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hanson. We do have one question. Mr. Hunt?
Mr. Hanson? Yes. Like this. Just help me understand, I'm sure Mr. Walker can add to this too, but you have the high school kids, and setting aside the one incident you and I are familiar with and talked about this year, but how much is the social media coming into the discipline market? I don't know if that's the right word, but arena for you. And I know that if two students get in a fight off campus, but it's related to something on campus, we have jurisdiction. If it was related to something not, we don't. But it's sort of the murky world of the internet and social media. So how is that beginning to be addressed with your discipline committees?
Well, I think that might be one of the first topics we talk about, because social media has definitely changed the game. It's been 10 years since I was a discipline assistant principal, or 9 years. And
it was 8, because Whitney graduated 8 years ago.
Was it 8 years?
Yeah, you handled her.
Okay, 8 years ago. And we weren't dealing with those things then. Right. And so it's definitely changed the game. And it's much of the discipline we're dealing with a lot of times it has to do with social media, because it's given kind of that freedom to say whatever you want without any boundaries. We deal with it. I mean, there's laws that we follow according to it, and we deal with it just like we do any other issue. But it is becoming a major issue. Social media is a fabulous tool for education on getting word out and getting information out. Looking at some of my teachers that have Facebook pages on their class, and students just go to that and homework's posted there, and it's an amazing tool, right. A tool that we can definitely benefit from. But it also has become a major event in dealing with discipline. It's something like any other discipline action that we just have to face and deal with. The second part of your question.
Well, it's evolving, and you're talking about laws, but has the Ed Code caught up with the misuses or the abuses? I know they focus on the bullying part of things.
I don't know if the Ed Code has essentially caught up, because I think it's changing every day.
Yeah, I mean, it's moving very fast.
And when you take someone like myself who's not real savvy at those things, I'm learning what Vine is now. because of an issue we're dealing with. And
Is that where
and
the
so
Twitter sits? Is on the, I don't know.
it's one of these short video things that just kind of repeats over and over and over. So, but I don't know if they're keeping up with it right now.
Or do we need, Mr. Walker, or are we allowed to look at that separately as a district and have our own?
Well, actually, there's been some recent action that actually allows us. In the past, there had to be a direct nexus between the action off campus and the school site itself. So if it caused a major disruption on the school site the next day and it caused a problem, then it's potentially suspendable offense if it disrupted school activities. With the recent action for cyberbullying, the district can take action to discipline a student who does something on a social media forum that has nothing to do with the school. May involve another student at the school, some threats, some bullying, but they can be held accountable, where in the past that was not a purview of the district to take discipline because it happened on the weekend or it happened away from the school site and it didn't disrupt school activities. The state legislature recently made that a portion of the Ed Code that allowed us to take action to discipline that student and give consequences should they do something that they've done on a social forum that wouldn't have been able to have consequences in the past. So to answer your question, yes, and it is, as Mr. Hanson mentioned, it is a ongoing morphing issue related to social media, Facebook, YouTube. In some cases, the students actually assist us. They film fights and they upload it to YouTube. I go on and I download it, and then they take it off the forum, and we have the video of them fighting on campus. So in some cases, it's a very good use. They're not using, their best decision making at that point in time, but often you'll see lots of phones up in the air when you capture one of those fights that takes place either on campus or off campus. But yes, to answer your question, the legislature is aware of it. The district is taking actions to try to keep it an issue that is at the forefront because it's ever evolving as we move forward.
In a different forum, the board learned about a situation at another district where a child was bullied and she committed suicide. So the district superintendent took the action, and it was but he was criticized quickly and had to pull back and all that, where it sort of became, it was a big brother. He was watching all the Facebook pages and all that. But how do you find out, or how do you get ahead of the bullying situation on Facebook? Just as a consumer out there, in his 50s, I hear about that nationally. And I've talked to Dr. Lewis about the things that he does with SROs as far as anything that might be a threat, a terrorist, a small T threat. But how are RUSD staying, and people like Mr. Hanson, our principal at King, staying ahead of that or finding out?
There are a couple of schools that are piloting a program where a student can voluntarily give information related to bullying and other concerns on campus that actually comes straight to our office. We get tagged on it, and it comes in. Mrs. Vanderwood is the front person for my office in relation to bullying and doing in-service training and ongoing support to the school sites in that particular area. So we do get information, and to be honest with you, parents and students are not shy when it comes to issues that are upsetting the education of themselves, their students, or others. The definition of bullying, I think, is misunderstood by a lot, and we do a lot of upfront work to help people understand what actually is the definition of bullying, but parents will bring it to our attention rather quickly when they see things on Facebook, when children bring a threat or a perceived threat. We get stuff sent to us electronically all the time that we follow through with and have conversations with parents on an ongoing basis. Again, there are some programs out there that allow for students to anonymously give information. The key, of course, is having the people and the personnel to be able to follow through with wading through that information and doing a quasi-investigation on each piece until you come up with something.
So you're saying there's programs out there, but it's not currently implemented?
No, we have them at some of our schools, but it's not district-wide at this point in time.
Okay. Would you allow Mr. Hanson also, I think you can answer just from a principal's point of view.
Mr. Walker is absolutely right. Parents aren't shy, nor students usually. But I think one of the most important things we could do is create a forum and create an opportunity for those that are concerned and are worried about reporting. And so one of the things that we've done is created a program directly linked to our website where they can report anonymously what's going on. We have bully boxes in our main office and actually in 2 locations on campus where they can write something up and just drop it in the box.
Okay.
And then those boxes are checked by our assistant principal of discipline to see if anything's on there, and then they can start the research. So I think usually the parents or the students freely come up, but for those that aren't so upfront and willing to do that, we're trying to create more and more opportunities so they can be free to express their concerns. Maybe it's just something they've seen, it's not their part of it, but they've seen, that they drop a note in, and then we start researching it from that point.
Thank you,
Thank
gentlemen.
you,
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Hanson. And I'll just say on that, too, that it's still real good old-fashioned face-to-face bullying still going on, too, but it's not all on the internet. And
No,
I know
that's
probably,
correct.
I'm sure Ms. Garcia deals with it more at her level. I know some of the kids aren't as sophisticated or don't have access to that stuff, but I see it in my daughter's elementary school. So we have another question from Mrs. Cloud, and then I think we're going to break for a few minutes. Mrs. Cloud?
I just have a comment to make. I want to thank you for presenting this information. And I think having a teacher committee on discipline and some of the things that you've brought forward tonight really kind of relieve some or alleviate some of my concerns. And I think, good job, you guys. Thank you.
I want to thank you. I want to thank the board for asking us to bring this presentation forward. I also want to thank my colleagues for their presentation and participation this evening, and Ms. Vanderwood for her efforts in assisting in putting this presentation together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Appreciate that. I would like to take a break till 7:45, please. Thanks.
item I.
Thank you. Ms. Mills, you have the next item. We're going to open our public hearing. This is item H1, our public hearing for negotiations with our RCTA.
Yes. This is a public hearing for 2014-15 initial proposals for negotiations submitted by the Riverside Unified School District Board of Education with the Teachers Union. And Riverside Unified School District Board of Education is proposing to negotiate the following sections of the collective bargaining unit agreement. Article 12, class size, and Article 18, peer assistance and review.
All right. Do we have any comments on those items? All right.
Also, for initial proposal for negotiations submitted by the Riverside City Teachers Association with the Riverside Unified School District Board of Education. Their initial proposal is to negotiate the following section of the collective bargaining unit agreement: Article 10, hours of employment, and Article 12, class size.
All right. Do we have any comments on those? All right. Thank you, Ms. Mills. Mr. Hunt?
I move to close the public hearing.
Okay. We close. Anybody second? I'll second, or Mr. Lee seconds. Public hearing is closed on those two items. Item H3, we reopen the public hearing. This is our 2014-2015 Special Education Annual Budget Plan. Who is giving this? Is this Mr. Walker? Mr. Walker, you are encouraged. Mr. Hunt, would you like to make a motion to waive that, or shouldn't you? Would you like me to ask? Mr. Walker, you can waive your staff report if this is something perfunctory, or do you feel you need to?
This is an annual process that takes place every year. It's a requirement of Ed Code. It was duly sent out across the district for notification to members, put in the newspaper, and you're required to open a public hearing and hear from anyone who might have something to say.
All right, so this is for, can we take both items H3 and H4 at the same time then in the
Yes,
public
you can.
hearing? All right. Do we have any members of the public or anybody that wishes to speak on those two items in this public hearing? All right, seeing no one.
Move to close the public hearing.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Walker. I suppose we could vote. All those in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Section I of our action, I1, is the adoption of the special education annual budget. Mr. Walker, I think you're back up again.
Yes, it's actually.
This is items
There were two
I1
public
and
hearings.
I2.
There's one for the budget plan, one for the service plan.
Okay.
So,
Can they be combined, Mr. Walker?
and that's fine if you opened and closed both of them at the same time. Then
Yeah, these are action items, so, yeah.
Yeah.
you did the
So
public hearings.
We're in
Okay.
action, so now we're adopting the budget.
Yeah, these
and the service
these next
plan.
two items have to do again with a perfunctory responsibility for you to, by Ed Code, adopt the budget and the service plan. Before you at the moment is the annual budget plan, followed, I believe, right after that by the service plan. The budget plan provides for clarification of the funds that are received and the expenditures that are currently calculated for use within the special education programs.
All right, Mr. Hunt?
Mr. Walker is I don't know if you know this, he's a parliamentarian, so I hope this is okay. But I make a motion to approve items one, is it I, Mike? Yeah, I.1 and I.2 with, of course, exception made for any of our colleagues' comments.
All right, we have a motion to approve items I1 and I2, and adopt the special education annual budget and the special education annual service plan.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I have no comments, so please, when your lights flash, vote. All right, Mr. Walker, you're
Thank you
back
very
in
much.
business for another year. Thank you. Next up, item I3 is the adoption of the Local Control and Accountability Plan. We have a report at the end of this very long road, which in some ways is just getting started, I think.
The best is yet to come.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Fine.
Good evening, Mrs. Lock-Dawson and members of the board. Thank you for your leadership and patience with us as we've worked down this very windy, long road. It's actually been a very exciting time, I think, for us. Although daunting in each step of the way, not quite sure what the next step was going to bring, but it really has been a very positive, exciting time to engage with our community and to engage internally with our internal community of stakeholders as well. And as I've said before, and certainly would be remiss in not raising it tonight, this is a collective effort of lots of folks. It's a collective effort of thousands of folks that heard us and spoke up. It's a collective effort, the plan itself of our staff, who've spent many, many hours taking what they heard from our community, what they heard from you, what they knew was best for kids, and kind of integrating all of that together in the plan. The plan that you have before you looks just like the last version. Sorry, it doesn't look just like it. It looks very different than the last version. Its contents, though, are in essence the same. The template, of course, now begins to follow the state template. Tomorrow, if you approve this tonight, and tomorrow when we submit this along with our budget to RCOE, it actually will grow in size to about 140 pages, because yesterday RCOE informed us that we can't just submit the contents, we have to submit all of the instructions that we were given with it. And so it will expand the document. When you see that final document a week from now, a month from now, just know that it is the same content that we brought you tonight. It's just full of all the preamble instructions that go with it. So that was a last minute. We didn't want to include all those instructions because we think that confuses our stakeholders. The content is what our stakeholders value and I think will appreciate. Other than correcting some spelling and a couple grammar items, the plan before you is identical to what you saw 2 weeks ago at the public hearing by way of content, with one exception. And 2 weeks ago, with respect to an item within Need 2 about expanding choices, we talked about expanding our dual language immersion program to up to 2 additional sites this fall. And subsequently, we've met with the instructional subcommittee, which Mrs. Cloud spoke about earlier in the report, and agreed that our one opportunity to expand next fall would be at Jefferson Elementary School. So we changed the plan to remove the terms up to 2 sites to specifically Jefferson Elementary School, and be very specific in it. We knew that before bringing you this tonight, and so that is the single change, other than just minor types of corrections along the way. So staff certainly recommends to you the adoption of our first local control and accountability plan.
Thank you, Mr. Fine. Mrs. Cloud?
I just want to clarify that one this year, but more in the future. That was not deleted, so we will have more, but dual immersion schools, dual language immersion.
Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to mislead that we were limited only one. For the first year, we would only be expanding to Jefferson. We actually, to the committee, spoke about our capacity to expand over the next 3 years to maybe 3 additional sites. However, we also talked at the committee that probably is our limit, that we don't want that program at every site, then it's not really a choice program. And we do have credentialing, and we do have facility limitations, and so we outlined for the committee kind of a 3-year maximum expansion type of idea.
Thank you for your expounding.
Thank you. Mr. Hunt?
And I'd like to see those. I do represent the area that goes almost to, feels like it goes almost to Newport Beach, but I like those areas considered. And I know Mr. Fine's been very good to explain to me it becomes a capacity, it becomes actually a facility challenge when we make these commitments in dual immersion. And it's a very good explanation, but I don't know it well enough to say it, but trust me, he does good. Mike, the item I had of concern with the homeless, the funding of the homeless position, is it in here or is that handled somehow?
So it is not in here. That program, in addition to the federal McKinley-Vento money, is supported by Title I. And so in working with Mr. Walker, we will work to increase the Title I allocation there as needed, or reallocate the Title I.
Yeah, and so we're not sending money back if we can.
So you're talking about specifically the grant, and if we don't perform on the grant as we applied, then we do send the unused back. And we will do that again this year because we didn't provide the full level of services that the plan that was submitted that received the funding anticipated, specifically in tutoring and some other areas. So part of it is we need to perform on when we submit a plan and receive funding according to that plan, we need to perform on that plan.
Look, I'm sure you're going to make sure, you and Dr. Hanson and Mr. Walker, that will not happen again. So, I had a question too, and I'm going to ask you, Mr. Fine. I should have asked Mr. Walker before the board. At the beginning of this, back last year, we had the situation, the special ed situation with that group that we had funded for so many years. And remember the moms came here and the little girl that knitted things and all that. I'm getting older, but I don't remember the name. But would you help me understand what we did with that and how, in our plans, if we're doing anything going forward, where the responsibility is? It was an emotional time for this board and for our community.
So it was actually an adult ed program, a life skills program, Riverside Adult Life Skills class here at Adult Ed. And when we were anticipating closing Adult Ed, we eliminated that program. And as you'll recall, it was more than just a transition program. A number of the students have been in the program for 15, 20 years. So it was a little bit more than transition. It was part of the adult program, not part of special ed. These were students that were outside of our special ed obligations up through age 22. And we reached out to each of those families. We were not, if I recall, the majority of the families did not respond back to us, but we reached out to each. Connie Wallen is the one that did that work for us out of Mr. Walker's special ed area, and reached out to each of those families, matched them up with the regional center services, which is the agency, funded agency that is designed to deal with that particular population, given at their age, at their stage, if you will, in life. And if I recall, it's been quite a while, Mr. Hunt, so the details aren't going to be as clear. But we identified some of those students who were not clients of the regional center, which is kind of very much an exception. Generally, when you're in that situation, you're a client of the local regional center. We matched those up. The regional center worked with us to give them priority, to get them in, sign them up as clients, and to facilitate their services that they may need in matching them up with resources in the community. And I think, actually, I give all the credit to Connie, really. Connie did a beautiful job of working with those folks and parents and caregivers. They weren't all parents, but certainly caregivers, to match those services up and to serve them. And have to be honest, we haven't heard anything more from them since Connie did that work.
So we're not going to see that. They're not going to be back.
No, that program is not. That program hasn't existed since last June or so, when it was closed a year ago, roughly. The topic of adult ed is still an open topic, with its kind of the light at the tunnel not being really clear where we're all going with it. The governor, in an earlier budget proposal, did indicate his intent to fund it in the future as a more traditional categorical program. And then you're aware that the governor's intent is that local school districts work as a consortium with their community college districts or other community organization partners, and as an organization operate adult class programs. And so we continue to work with our area partners, Riverside City College District and some of the school districts around us, in building the vision for what would be our local consortium here that would serve the Riverside area. And those discussions are ongoing. I would expect next year we'll see some legislation in that regard. And then some adult ed services are included in the LCAP, specifically with respect to need 6, where we focus a lot of attention on parent education.
Right.
We have staff now on board, been on board the last 6 weeks or 2 months or so, that's very focused on that, and as a district to begin to coordinate programs like PTA's School Smarts, other PTA training that's offered in the area, PK, Parent Institute for Quality Education, and programs like that, along with what we would develop, and the LCAP speaks to that, developing some of those services for our parents, including the early impact program and a variety of other services that are identified. Those are all intended in the plan, are specifically called out to use what we used to call adult ed funds. They're now really K-12 program funds, but we've continued to label them with that adult ed in part to meet our maintenance of effort requirements going forward.
With that, Ms. Lock-Dawson, if you would, with recognition that Sacramento has sleight of hand, so local control is a term of art. But I think I'd like to motion that we approve our accountability plan and commend the staff, Mr. Fine in particular, the architect, and everyone that got involved, including what I was so pleased with was, and I learned so much as a board member, was the students and the parents being involved and hearing from those we served. I think, at least for this board member, it really helped me understand, and hearing from teachers who were willing to step forward. I commend Mr. Martin's group and others. So I'd make a motion that we approve this, which you said is just the beginning of the road.
All right. With the exception or the addition of the language.
It's in here.
That's okay.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Second.
Okay. All right.
Right there for a minute.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the LCAP plan, and I echo Mr. Hunt's sentiments that this was an ambitious and wonderfully crafted plan that included all of our community and showed that we listened. So thank you. Okay, please vote. All right, motion carries. Thank you. All right, Ms. Meekins, hard act to follow.
Yes.
I know. Now we have to listen to the budget, but I know it's going to be fascinating.
Why do I hear so many people leaving?
Know how to clear a room. Start
I guess
talking
that was-
budgets.
Those were,
Yes.
I guess we should have thanked staff who worked so hard, because there they all are leaving, all the ones that worked on it.
Mrs. Lock-Dawson, members of the board, Mr. Fine, Dr. Hanson. The item before you is the adoption of our 2014-15 initial budget, which was reviewed by our Finance Committee on June 10th. Before continuing, I would like to acknowledge the extensive work and numerous hours put in by Dalia Galdamalia, our budget manager, aka interim fiscal services manager, the business services staff, and all of the site and school staff who helped produce this budget report. Let's see. Here we go. The state budget process at this point, and I have to explain at this point, was a week ago, and between that point in time and now, this has totally changed. The bottom half of the slide up there we're going to just totally ignore. We've moved past this point in our process with our state assembly. But I would like to say that the May revise the budget has primarily maintained what the governor has in his May revise. It's added a couple things. So on the continued commitment for LCFF, we have now added $250 million over the governor's proposed budget. They are increasing the gap from 28.05% to 29%. For RUSD, that's another $1 million in revenue. Paying down the wall of debt, part of it, the governor was going to eliminate the wall of debt, and now we're going to maybe have some deferred payments at the end of 14-15. The rainy day fund is still in the creation phase. It will be voted on by our voters, and if it is approved, the governor or the senators and the assemblymen have decided that they wanted to add a reserve cap. This cap is a reserve for our district, for our designated for reserves, and it's going to limit what we're able to do with our reserves and how much we're going to have. And I'll ask Mr. Fine to give us some more information on that, if he would.
Well, I think the deal that's been struck for support of a November election is certainly a concern for everybody at the local level. It is really the state ignoring the whole idea of local control and now imposing a cap on our reserve levels without any regard to the unique characteristics of each district or needs in each district. And so it's in my opinion very much a step backwards in everything that the governor has promoted and the work we've done over the last 2 years with LCFF, and the whole idea of that local control just completely throws that out and goes backwards. There are some practical issues here, and that is that this isn't triggered on an everyday basis. It's triggered under certain circumstances. Whether we ever meet those circumstances or not, we're going to have to see. There's a commitment to continue the conversation, but this is, I'm not sure what that commitment really means at this point. Credit to our own Senator Roth. He was the one senator that spoke up Sunday morning in committee and started to ask questions about it. He had information from us. He had information from others, and certainly did his part in speaking up and asking questions, none of which were answered by the administration. Ultimately, it was left in place. It could have some very chilling impacts, including all of our bond ratings. We just did an upgrade in our bond, or an update in our bond rating last week, and the comments back from the bond raters were reserve levels need to be increased and things like that, and then we come along with something like this. So we'll have to see as this unfolds after November what its practical implications are for all of us.
Thank you. The Clean Energy Jobs Act has been decreased in funding from $307 million to $279 million, so we will not get as much as we anticipated. The child care programs have been increased. We have additional slots now, so that was a good thing. Independent study, there was no change between the governor's May revise and what the legislators have suggested. The phase-in for CalSTRS, the unfunded liability, this was a real surprise move from the governor's May revise that was going to cost our district $2.4 million this next year. It is now being rephased in at a lower phase-in rate, so it will now only cost us $1.2 million in this next year. But in the out years, the impact is still going to be cumulatively the same, which is about $8.2 million for us. 8.2, or 82, sorry. Thanks. 82 million. A few other changes. The governor had some one-time funds of $27 million for network connectivity assessment. There's been no change in that from the legislature. The governor had no funding for mandate claims or prior year claims. The state does want to start paying down that mandate wall of debt, so they have set aside some money for that. The state owes Riverside Unified $32 million from early in the 1990s until our recent claims. Yeah. And the governor also had no funding for Career Pathways program. The legislative area has now included $250 million for a second round. This is one place that we had unsuccessfully tried to get the grant, and we will try again and be more successful. The end game is already in process. The constitutional deadline for the legislature to adopt the budget was June 15th. It is now in the governor's hand, and he has until June 30th to sign the budget into law. I remind you that when we built our budget, it was built on his May revise, so any changes that have been made will not be reflected in our budget until we do either a 45-day revision or we do it at first interim. I have to say that, and I didn't think I would ever say this, that I'm going to miss the revenue limit. The revenue limit was the base limit, COLA, deficit. These are now the percentages that we have when we calculate our funding. Of special importance is the 28.06, which is now going to 29%. And whenever the LCFF gap funding increases, it also increases our minimum proportionality percentage, the MPP, so that will go up to about 8%. Special education is getting a COLA. The retirement contributions have changed, but again, we built our budget using these calculations. Our enrollment for 14-15 has increased by 244, and that has to do somewhat with our district of choice. We are still increasing enrollment because of district of choice, just not at the accelerated rate that we were before. And we also have a little tiny bubble coming up because of birth rates. Enrollment increases, therefore ADA increases, so we're looking at 222 ADA. The revenue limit that I missed has been replaced with this. Each grade span has a base per ADA, as you can see, so you look at K3. We then add a grade span factor, which is our old CSR for K3 and also for 9-12. We then add supplemental and concentration. And you'll see that total 2020-21 target per ADA. That is exactly what it says, a target. That is what we will get in 2020-21 year. The bottom line is what we actually get next year. So there's a $3,000 difference between future what we would get and what we are actually getting now. And how does it compare to our old revenue limit? If I factor in the Tier 3 and categoricals, we would have gotten $6,253 per ADA on the old revenue limit. So we're doing better. A couple other things that we've included in our budget is our lottery. It has gone up by $2. This is a total of $96,000 for us. Lottery unrestricted is $5.6 million and restricted is $1.3 million. Restricted is used for textbooks. For the federal revenues, whether you want to call it restoration, sequestration, expectation, it's just another way of saying that our funding is relatively going to remain flat this next year for us. Some more building blocks for our budget. These are the expenditures. We have our step-in column, which is $2.6 million. We have compensation increases, that's 6%, and the extended day, which is 11.6. We always have staffing related to either enrollment growth or decline. This time we have a growth. Our CalPERS increase, a CalSTRS increase, and then actually a decrease in cost would be our energy consultant contract now expires. And then we have our LCAP. So between the LCAP and the previous page, the total is $50.3 million. This is $50.3 million over and above our normal costs that roll in. So the general budget, at the top, you're going to see our revenues. So the total revenue, both unrestricted and restricted, is $372.5 million. Our total expenditures and uses, $384 million. We are deficit spending this next year by 11.6. This is a planned deficit. It's in our LCAP plan. We're using some of our reserves, especially on Need 1, Common Core, and CSR. And for those who like to see a chart instead of a matrix, this is our total revenue, $372 million, and as you can see, LCFF revenue is the largest part of it at $307.4. On our expenditures, our salaries and benefits total $310 million. That is for 2,147 certificated positions and 1,261 classified positions. This is a general overview. Big picture, we start with a beginning balance of $86 million. We add our projected revenues, $372, subtract our expenditures, our net other uses, and that other uses is transfers out for our debt service and for our liability insurance, our property liability insurance. So our ending fund balance at 6/30/15 projected is $75 million. That ending fund balance on the bottom is broken down into our revolving cash and our store inventory. We have a restricted at $17 million, categorical programs, assigned, which is broken down on the next page, our reserve, which is 7.6, and then our unassigned, almost $40 million, to give us a total of the 75. When we assign, we're setting things aside. So we have our school and program carryovers at 1.5. Some of what we call our programs, E-rate, Medi-Cal, the activities carryover, our mandated cost, which is set aside until the audits are finished, because we usually end up with an 80% audit finding and they want their money back. And we set aside enough for our equipment replacement, which includes our trash trucks and our copiers. Our deficit, again, we start with our $372 in revenues. We expend $380. Our uses are another $3 million, so we have a deficit of $11. It is split between unrestricted and restricted, 6 in unrestricted and 4 in restricted. Up until this point, we've been talking about current year, or next year, 14-15 budget. We now go to the multi-year summary. So in 2014-15, you see we have our deficit of 11.6. In 15-16 and 16-17, our projection is that we will not have a deficit, we will have excess of $2.9 million in each year. Our ending fund balance will then increase by that 2.9 each year. So we start with 75, add the 2.9, come to 77.9. The minimum fund balance is a combination of our stores, our inventory, our revolving cash, and our restricted categorical funds. Cash flow. Again, the Governor's Bay Revised proposed the elimination of the deferrals. The legislature may not eliminate all the deferrals, but there are still a major portion of them that will be eliminated. A reminder again that Prop 30 is set to expire in 2016 and the final piece in 2018. This is before we are fully funded on our target ADA. Our liquidity in our other funds is diminishing, but our cash outlook does look extremely well. Again, cash deferrals at 0. Our June projected cash is $83.6 million. Future considerations, of course, the CalSTRS phase-in, the unfunded liability, is going to impact us in the next few years. Our Common Core standards, we have funded our Common Core. The expenditures end on June 2015, but our implementation continues beyond that, so we need to take that into account. Of course, we have our technology for our students. We need to make sure that our programs are sustainable. And we have our facilities needs, which was mentioned earlier, not only for dual language immersion, but for CSR, preschool, STEM, our growth. And we have a gap in timing between when we need those facilities and getting a future bond and having some sort of local funding for them. So our financial outlook is improving. because the state's financial outlook is improving, we do need to plan carefully and align everything to our newly adopted LCAP plan. And staff recommends the adoption of the 14-15 all funds budget. Questions?
Thank you, Ms. Meekins. Would anybody like to entertain a motion? Ms. Cloud?
I'll motion approval. Thank you. You did a clear job. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion.
Other than that one decimal point.
Oh, thank you.
We have a motion
Minor.
and a second by Mr. Lee to approve the budget. Please vote. Thank you, Ms. Meekins. Appreciate it. All right. Our last action item of the evening is the approval of our...
Your applause on that for that kind
Yeah. It's the approval of our recommended instructional materials for AP Foreign Language and electives. So we have some new instructional materials. Thank you, Dr. Ermert.
Thank you, Mrs. Lock-Dawson, Mr. Fine, members of the board. Tonight we do bring before you for your approval, we recommend approval for materials that have been to the instructional subcommittee and have been on display. The textbooks have been on display for the required 30 days prior to your adoption of these materials. As Mrs. Lock-Dawson mentioned, these will support our foreign language program in French and advanced placement classes there, as well as some pretty exciting medical Academy CTE classes that Mrs. Cloud and Mr. Lee will recall we discussed at the instructional subcommittee. So with that, I'd like to ask Lisa Kells, our instructional services specialist for English language arts as well as foreign language, and Jorge Perez, our career and career readiness instructional services specialist, to bring you more information.
Okay, good evening, President Lock-Dawson, Mr. Fine, members of the board, and a special good evening to Dr. Ermert. This last May, you guys approved 2 courses for us to give students a better opportunity for them to be college and career ready. The first one was the First Responders course, and the second one was Medical Terminology. Both were approved. The AP French course that we're asking you to adopt a new book for has been a long-standing course in our district. As required, we advertised in the Press Enterprise. It was posted on our website, and it's been on display at the district for 30 days. And the funding source that we would use for the AP French book would be the lottery textbook funds. So, please don't ask me to pronounce that. That is the title of our French book that we're proposing. And the reason that we're asking is because in 2012, the AP test has changed. And so we're trying to find the materials that will best prepare our kids to be successful on that AP test. And these are the strategies of why College Board recommends this textbook. Okay.
Good evening, Mrs. Lock-Dawson, Mr. Fine, members of the board. As mentioned before, we also have California Partnership Academies bringing forward 2 books for adoption. The following textbooks are for use with current technical education courses that have been taught in the past by the Regional Occupational Program through Riverside County Office of Ed. The RUSD courses, or as RUSD courses, these textbooks will allow teachers to teach the courses at any of our high schools. Of course, as with any other course, teachers teaching these courses will need to have the appropriate teaching credentials for that subject area. So the first book that we bring to you is First Responder, your first response in emergency care, and it is for our First Responder course, or year-long course at currently Ramona High School's Health and Bioscience Academy. So within this course, it gives us students an orientation to first responders, law and ethics, cardiac emergency, CPR. So our students actually are CPR certified upon the completion of this course. In addition to that, we've actually taken these skills and we'll be up in Sacramento, leaving tomorrow to apply for a capacity grant, which we use this course as one of the bases to provide those services to our middle school students in learning about CPR also. So it's relevant not only to our current high school students, but it kind of works with our middle schools also. But the students also will learn about things such as poisoning, childbirth, infants, children's, and EMS support for our society. Now, the textbook, it increases rigor because it's more rich in content and it is considered a college-level book. Because of that, we have applied for articulation this past January with Riverside Community College District for the Moreno Valley campus to also any student that would complete this course and meet the prerequisites, which is a certain letter grade still to be established by the Riverside Community College District, could apply for college credit and therefore either at the 9th grade or 10th grade already have college credit under the belt at one of our local campuses. The second book that we bring to you also is Language of Medicine, and that's for our medical terminology course that we currently offer also at Ramona. Why use this course? Well, the texts will be used to introduce students to the language of medicine. Medical words are taught along with their relationship to human body. Students will become familiar with the vocabulary and word parts that will help them comprehend anatomy, physiology, pathology, diagnostic techniques, medical treatments and procedures. This book, once again, also like the previous book, is also considered a college-level book, and it lends itself to not only, once again, the courses there, but to any student outside of the career technical education that truly wants to pursue the medical field. So this could lend itself to students that want to pursue the medical field as a nurse, as a doctor, or even as entry-level X-ray technicians and so forth. Because it is called a college-level book, we've also have gone ahead and applied for articulation credit with Riverside Community College District once again, the Moreno Valley College campus for Medical Terminology 1A. And just like the previous course, if they meet the prerequisites, our students could also be earning 3 credits of college worth work before entering the community college or another university. Thank you. Any questions?
Mrs. Cloud?
I just have a quick question. We talked a little bit about this, but isn't the CTC changing the requirements for CTE instruction? So some of these courses might have to have a different type of instructor, correct?
We are.
Because there's they're right.
We've been in communication with our Human Resource Department to address those issues, and our Human Resource Department has been in communication with our state representatives that oversee our current funding programs, such as the Perkins grant and also the California Partnership Academies grant folks, to determine what is it they're asking, but alongside also what the California Teaching Commission is also requiring of our teachers. So we're working with our teachers to see what is required and how can we work best to provide them that support so that they can.
Well, I thank you for being proactive and reaching out and doing some of that. And with that, if there's no other, I would move approval. They did come before us, and they're great opportunity. The courses are great opportunities for our kids. So.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Cloud. We do have a comment or a question from Mr. Hunt.
I'll second Ms. Cloud's motion, but I just want to ask, and, I'm sorry, I didn't get your name, ma'am.
Okay. Lisa Kell.
Ms. Kell. Where do we offer, what high schools do we offer French at now?
French is offered at all of the high schools, I believe, right now, except for North. And the AP French class will be offered next year at Poly High School. Okay. They're the ones that have the numbers to make the class.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. So we've got a motion and a second to approve the instructional materials presented to us. Please vote. Thank you. That item carries. Appreciate all your work on that. Thank you, Dr. Erbert. All right, we've come to the conclusion of our meeting tonight, our one of two this summer that we have. And it's time for our board member comments. Mr. Hunt, would you like to go first tonight?
Sure. Thanks. But I would ask, and I know it takes a while for things to gel, but just like with Ms. Kells, I would like to see, and I mentioned this a couple meetings back, names of the people that are going to be doing the presentations, I respect Ms. Kells. I shouldn't have to ask her name. It should be here. And I think everybody knows that she was going to give that presentation well in advance. So if we could just begin to do a little more of that, I'd appreciate it. Went to, like all of you, went to graduation ceremonies. I went to Central. Advancement was very nice. And to Arlington, where I know that Betsy thought there was a problem, but there wasn't. One thing I should tell you about, and also Mr. Fine gets credit for this too, is that Betsy Smeckel was not at Arlington until mid-January, and Antonio, so I assume we forget, left us earlier than that, and Dee and others that were there who really held the ship. They had the second highest, only the King by, on the other side of the decimal, they had the second highest graduation rate. I think it was 98.2, I believe, for, is that right, Dee? All right. For Arlington, and just a bunch of beautiful, bright kids. So it was very enjoyable. I also want to say I went to the Reef Golf Tournament yesterday, and thank you, Mrs. Ramirez, and Tilden Coyle, HMC, Neff, and a lot of others I'll leave out, Provident and others. But my understanding is you'll net about 50,000, you think, out of that? And that is outstanding. I want to mention that I had a good conversation with Dr. Lewis past week. Like all of us, including the president, this idea that school shootings have become the norm is just unacceptable. And Dr. Lewis was able to brief me on what are his procedures, the district procedures for when there is a call to that kind of problem. And so what I asked him to do, a couple things. One, if working with the president and the superintendent sometime the next 3 months or so, to give us a little workshop on that, to also tell us what other measures we could afford to take and that we should take. And one of them was, we're able to send Kirk and some others here and there to conferences, but I think it's important that our campus leaders be at those conferences, and it's hard to do that. So Kirk's going to look into the right kind of speakers and others that could come here, and we'll find a way. I know that's tough, but that the principals can have the time off and really hear some of these cutting edge type of things. It is a sad commentary on our nation. I can't do a darn thing about that, but what we can do up here is try to prepare our district for the worst and just pray for the best. Speaking of the best, I want to commend Jackie Paul, who aptly managed a strong request from the press enterprise for records relating to our recent district superintendent search, including the names and resumes of the other candidates. She was able to clearly get across that to the reporters that those are confidential items, and I think the reporter was after sensationalization. Help me. Thank you. That story, and I want to commend Mrs. Paul's professionalism and clear understanding of the laws that protect the public personnel process and those individuals and us, and she should be commended as I am tonight. And I encourage Dr. Hanson that when available, that she should be placed in the district office rather than being on Washington Street. She should be near the cabinet that she works so close with, particularly with the report that we know that's happening at the press enterprise. They came and spoke to a Raincross group last Friday morning, the editor did, and though he didn't bring it up, over the next 3 months, everybody on that staff over there has to take a 10-day furlough. As a Riversider, I'm greatly concerned, and I'm one of those people that has to have the ink on my fingers in the morning, and others probably read it online, but without a local newspaper, that's one problem. But making sure that our message gets out is on Jackie and the superintendents and others' hands. So with that, I thank you for the great work, Mike, that you've done for us on this. Someone asked me the other day about Mike Fine, and I said, well, he's sort of like the Wikipedia of RUSD. There's a movie, I forgot what it's called right now, but Jeff Bridges plays the president, and he constantly calls down to the kitchen the head chef at the White House and challenges him on a meal. You call up, well, I want a moose sandwich, and it will always, yes, sir, no problem. Would you like that rare or not? And this sort of thing. And that's what, sometimes they even do that with Mike, it seems like, is that he knows what's going on in this district. To just segregate him just to knowledge would be wrong. He's proven through the LCAP to be a strategic thinker, and to segregate him just to those two would be wrong, because as Gail talked about earlier, Mike Fine deeply cares about this district, whether it's a single student and a parent, a teacher that's struggling with his or her workload, a principal that needs some attention, our maintenance workers, and clueless or at times board members. I can tell you he takes care of it all, and we're pleased that he's here. And I think we've got Batman and Superman as a team, quite frankly, going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Mr. Lee, would you like to say a few words?
Well, I'll just keep it short. I actually had the privilege to do a few graduation ceremonies. It was my first time, so I was really honored to be a part of that at Ramona and at Chemawa and at Lincoln. And it was amazingly well organized, so congratulations to the principals and the assistant principals and the whole staff that put that together. I know that's a lot of work to get all those kids in line, and probably even more so their parents and their family. But it was special to see those kids walk up and to see them smiling and how excited they were to make it to that point. So I was glad to be a part of it, and it was fun, and probably the coolest part of my job so far up here. So appreciate the opportunity of those schools allowing me to participate actively and sit up there on the stage with those kids and honor them on that day. So that's it. And also, actually, I'd also want to commend Mr. Fine and thank him for filling in the interim role. He's done an amazing job. Really impressed with that whole LCAP process. He is really even Wikipedia is sometimes wrong, and I don't know how often Mike's wrong. But anytime I had a question, he rarely had to look it up. He just could answer my question and make me feel not so stupid at the same time. So I appreciate that, and you being patient with me. And like Mr. Hunt, I feel like we have a great duo here, and beyond that, and with our cabinet. So I look forward to having you come online, Dr. Hansen, coming in July, and working with our staff and doing some great things. So glad to have you here, and it's great to see your family. And I noticed that when you were giving props to your wife was trying to give your daughter knuckles, and she refused. And so I think you're going to have to implement some disciplinary action when you get home.
Or, well, at least she wasn't giving her knuckles of a different kind, right? Okay. Mrs. Cloud.
Well, first of all, Mr. Hunt reminded me, this is probably Dr. Ermer's last meeting, but you can always come back, the last official meeting. And I personally, and I'm sure I speak for the board, want to thank you for many years of wonderful service. You were one of the most genial people that I know, and you have served the district well. Thank you. I also was proud of our graduation ceremonies. I was at North, first time in the new stadium. It was flawless, and I want to thank Dr. Sheffield for that. She even got it under an hour and a half, which Mr. Fine says is the magic hour. And I was at Sierra, and congratulations to Mr. Ibarra as well. Well-run district graduations. I want to thank Sandy and the Reef Golf Tournament for doing such an outstanding job, for raising so much money for our district. It was one of the largest, I think, that I've ever attended, and I think I've just about gone to all of them. And I also want to highlight for my fellow board members and mostly for the audience, we as board members get a little magazine called CSBA.org, California School News. And the last couple of months caught my attention, and the one in May, because Fordham, I'm sure most of you have heard of the Thomas B. Fordham Institute in Washington, D.C., published a study, Does School Board Leadership Matter?, looking at data from a 2009 survey of 900 school boards. Some of the things are probably pretty commonsensical. But this comment I thought was appropriate. Districts are more likely to beat the odds when they are governed by school boards whose members have an academic focus over those who advocate a whole child or a different approach. Let me see. Professional backgrounds and political ideologies influence their capacity, specifically how accurately informed they are. These are things to keep in mind. The board trustees should keep learning and achievement for all students as the primary focus, which is our #1 board goal. Recognize and respect differences of perspective and style on the board and among staff, students, parents, and the community. Participate in professional development and commit the time and energy necessary to be an informed and effective leader. The Fordham Institute study found that the majority of board members committed fewer than 4 days monthly to board work, and I would say that certainly doesn't characterize us. So
certainly not last week.
No, no. Just for the audience knows, this has been a year of a lot of transitions and changes and has required a lot of board interaction and meetings, especially for the president. So I thought, for the most part, we could get high marks on this, but if you want to look at it, it's the Fordham Institute. And they're the ones that graded school, the state standards, and gave California, I think, was it a B+ or an A-? And anyway, the California School News for June actually caught my attention because although I realize we are implementing Common Core, and as a board member, I support implementation, but there are a lot of questions. And Joe Lucy, who is our CSBA president, actually commented, and that's unusual. She's an engineer, just for the information. Near and dear to my heart, math. She shared that she has grave concerns about the baseline Common Core math curriculum and that depending on how you as board members adopt the curriculum, you have the potential to expand or limit the opportunities for many of your strongest and most capable students. So I would just reiterate that we have the opportunity, as we've always reminded staff, to do what's right for our students. I don't care what is going on out in the big picture. We are the microcosm where our students learn, and we need to make sure they do. So, thank you. And thank you for all of your hard work this season, Mrs. Lock-Dawson.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. Thank you. Very briefly, I just wanted to thank Dr. Ermert. He's been with us 38 years. 38 years. It's almost as old as I am. That's what Mr. Fine said. JK. But I will say this. You know, when I came on as a clumsy new board member, and now I'm just a clumsy old board member, but when I first came on, I really didn't know what I was doing. And as Mr. Lee pointed out, nobody gives you a book. Nobody tells you how to be on the board. Nobody tells you what to do. You have to figure it out. But I will say Dr. Ermert was the only person, and this isn't a mark against anybody else, but I just found it very touching. He reached out to me and asked me out to lunch and treated me like a human, and I have never forgotten that, Bill. It's very, very, I don't know, just speaks to the person that you are. So thank you. You made me feel welcome. So I wish you the best of luck, and as I told you, as Mrs. Cloud says, come on back. I'm sure we'll find something for you. We also did a bunch of graduations last week. Everybody knows that, but in the middle of all that, I think I did 4. I think Project Team, Mr. Walker, wonderful. That was I never did Project Team before. That was awesome. I just love that. If you haven't been to one of those graduations, I'd encourage you to go. It's neat to see. Oh, sorry. What are they? They're not graduating. They're emancipating. Moving on. So anyway, it was wonderful. But and Polly and Earhart and one other one I did, EOC. So it was a good time. But in the middle of all that, Mr. Fine and I had the opportunity to go see some of our finest teachers at Washington Elementary. and their principal got recognized at the Distinguished Schools Award ceremony, which is very cool. And I'm wearing my Distinguished Schools button, so I wore it tonight in honor of that. So good work, and I know it's Anu, right? Anu got her school prior to coming to RUSD recognized as well at the same, so that was kind of fun to have you there as well. So we had a good time. Again, thank you, Mr. Fine. Appreciate it. Can't say enough good things about you. Very quickly, I just want to adjourn our meeting tonight in honor of Augustina Meraz. She was previously a food service worker at Central, and she passed away on May 23rd, 2014. So I would really like to end tonight's auspicious meeting in her honor and wish you all a very happy summer, and we will see you on July 28th. Thank you.